if I start on the left of the stage, we've got Gail Bradbrook, who was a co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, and then seated next to her, we have Zoe Cohen, who's a Just Stop Oil spokesman, who's also been involved with Insulate Britain. Shane is a old Green Party activist from. I've known Shane for a very long time. Shane is. Shane's been very involved in Green Party politics for a long time. He's a councillor in Frome, and he's been involved in all kinds of activism, including climate activism, for at least 30 years. And then Sarah is also a former Green Party councillor, but no longer, as I understand. And now you're doing Just Stop Oil, and you can talk about the rest. So please begin.
So anyway, we're going to start with Gail on the left, just a rundown of what we're all each individually being up to. So yes, here we go. Over to you, Gail.
Is this microphone working?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Extinction Rebellion, please do go down to our tent not far away to sign up, is going to be doing an action at the end of the month around upgrade democracy. It's the focus on our third demand. And little birds tell me that citizens' assemblies and the Labour Party, there may be something coming. So it's quite a good time for a focus on our third demand. That said, what Extinction Rebellion's been very good at doing in the last couple of years is working with the movement of movements, 100,000 people on the streets of order for the big one, and for then Restore Nature Now. And actually a lot of the work that needs doing at the minute, on a reformist agenda, if you like, in terms of getting the assemblies landed into mainstream politics, does need that movement of movements. And of course, a lot of NGOs have to promote their own businesses. What XR is about the mission. And so if we are behind the scenes making big things happen and we don't have to front it, we're very willing to do that. So that's all cool stuff. A blessings on JSO, by the way, because we did these two big things. You tell the story, don't you, really? Because 100,000 people on the streets marching, 100,000 people over 4 days, no coverage. Two people doing a brilliant action, in my opinion, at Stonehenge. Two people doing a brilliant action in a snooker hall. It's all over the press. So, you know, they're different purposes to the movements, though. They both need to be honoured. They both have their rationale. Speaking for myself, I've been focused on what I feel with others, especially working with our more melanated kin, who are visionary leaders of colours and cultures, to feel into what these times really need, this predicament. We've been calling ourselves being the change. There's an internationalism piece that's super important to do with just transition. I'll be talking about that on Sunday at the Trad Dome. Having been to visit and experience some decolonial struggles in West Africa. People racialised as white don't always want to hear about other people's struggles. As a white glaze, things happen. So maybe just, if that's what just happened to you, oh, West Africa, not me, maybe come along and hear why it's incredibly important to our movements. I've been thinking about meta-strategy with an embarrassingly called Paradigm Shift group. And we've also, a group of us have been re-looking at the principles and values that underpinned our movement and doing a redraft and upgrade. It may be some time before we present them to the world. I've been working on Skeena Rathor's co-liberation change-making, because we do need to work out how we're actually going to do power and privilege issues once and for all, because we can't ignore them and we can't do them in the blaming and shaming way. So how do we do them? That's been Skeena's visioning, so that's work in the progress. And finally, working on what's called collapse-aware communities. It could be called something else, but like, how are we going to meet the fall into pieces, the breaking together, in a way that's anti-fascist? So that's the other piece of work I've been over. So quite a busy girl. Oh, and I've got to mention the perimenopause, vaginas, and Amanita muscaria, because I always do. But the perimenopause in the face of all that was quite a struggle. Thank you.
So I guess before I say anything about me, I just really want to honour, because I feel really humbled speaking in front of this audience, because I know there's many people in this audience, well, as per the introduction, who've done so much for many, many years, and there's also a number of people in this audience who have spent significant time behind bars, giving up their liberty for a much higher purpose. So I want to honour all of that courage and bravery. In terms just of snapshot of me, I'm basically an ordinary mum. I've been in civil resistance for 5.5 years and I'm knackered. It takes a lot out of you, doesn't it? And some of the learnings I've been doing over the last few months is understanding more deeply that we really are nature too, and that we really do need to look after ourselves and our health. And pushing up against a pretty fucking immovable object takes it out of you. So that's been a really important learning for the last few months for me, which has been good. I've been taking action, training other people, training other people to speak in the media, etc., with Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and Just Stop Oil for 5.5 years, which might explain when I'm a bit knackered. I'm actually not actively taking action as of the last few months. I'm not actively doing a lot of spokesperson work, although I'm doing a little bit with XR, but I'm still actively doing bits of spokesperson training. So if anyone wants a bit of coaching and training on speaking in the media, I'm really happy to do that if you contact me, because I still really love doing that. As Gail has very kindly pointed out on a number of occasions, which is very generous of her.
Award-winning. I was about to actually.
It's really one of these sort of head fucks in the system. You know how the system locks us up, but also holds us on a sort of weird pedestal while shooting at us in a weird way. UK PR Week last year nominated me as one of the top UK communicators.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
And which I don't say any point of ego, just morally pointing out the head fuck of this stupid fucking system. On the one hand, extract the hell out of everything, fuck everything, but then give you awards for stuff whilst locking you up. So, the two of us here have got suspended sentences for breaking bank windows to try and change the political economy because it's fucking killing us, and then they give you an award. It's just totally crazy. So I want to honour every single of the 21 people who are in prison right now. Every single one of them. I've only spent a few days on remand, but that was enough to for me to experience get a taster experience on it. And particularly just want to call out our window breaking sister Amy Pritchard, who because she's a fellow window breaking sister, and 10 months prison for breaking a bit of fucking glass is an obscenity. It's an absolute obscenity. And she was also picked on very, very clearly. Any of us who sat there through that ridiculous trial with Judge Reed, it was so clear that was a punitive attack on her because she stuck up to his patriarchal crap more than anyone else did. And so he punished her with it, and it was disgusting, and it was obscene patriarchy. So fuck Judge Reed, but let's love Amy more than is possible. So yeah, everyone just write Amy in prison because she needs as much love and support, just like all the other 20 people do. But yeah, love to Amy.
I'm as Phil said, Councillor Shane Collins now. I got involved in this lark, I think, in the late 80s when the first sort of climate change reports were becoming quite apparent, and left a dodgy career in the film business, and got involved with Cool Town Arts, a big squatted community arts centre in Brixton, and Twyford Down, what became the Twyford Down campaign. And really, I think I got involved with the Green Party in the 1989 European elections because that seemed to be where the activity was. And in a way, what I've been trying to do since then is to keep doing stuff with the Green Party and keep the Green Party linked in with other environmental action movements are springing up. So, the Rose protest at Twyford, in the early 90s, which was the sort of rebirth of the British environmental movement after a bit of a slowdown after the anti-nuclear stuff of the 90s. And you know, that then exploded all around the country. Anywhere that had one of the Conservatives' road building programmes in the early 90s seemed to start up a local group opposing it. And then various of us who'd been nicked at Twyford and were banned from going back and having to sign on at the police station, we really felt quite guilty because all our mates were down at Twyford getting done over by nasty security. So we decided to form up a sort of urban response to this, which was looking at climate change, we were looking at air pollution, it was looking at the amount of land that cars and roads and parking take up. And so we had a meeting at Friends Meeting House and formed up Reclaim the Streets Action Network. And that was really looking to be part of all these anti-roads campaigns around the country. And because we had that most necessary thing of a roof, you know, a big squat, we had a huge squatted factory and then a huge squatted dole office in Cold Harbour Lane. And that gave us an office space. So, you know, the Lambeth Green Party started up there. The London Green Party had an office. Earth First had an office. Reclaim the Streets. And then Freedom Network, the campaign against the Criminal Justice Bill in the mid-90s. And every 6 weeks we would have a benefit for a different campaign. And that served as a place to get activists together, a place where new people could come and get involved and meet activists and become part of something bigger than us individually. And so, yeah, I think strategically, you know, one has always recognised that the parliamentary route is one thing, but non-violent direct action, which has always been part of the Green Party's manifesto and support for it, is also very effective. And, you know, we've got to remember one of the main reasons that the Conservatives' road building plans in the 90s, why we beat it, because it was becoming A, unpopular, B, incredibly expensive. You know, we just mentioned Phil and thousands of others squatting much of the M11 in East London. I think, was it 11 million security costs or something like that? I mean, they were astronomical, as well as, you know, any machinery that was left unguarded, whether it was Twyford or M11 or various other places, you know, had soil, oil, sand in the tank and all this sort of thing. So, you know, it was a sort of a dual strategy of using the media to draw attention to a bad thing going on, trying to affect political policy change through political parties, but also trying to affect the bottom line by making it cost a hell of a lot more. And that meant that by the end of the 90s, we did at last beat and stopped the Conservatives' road building programme. Because, you know, it may seem pretty shit at the moment, and in many respects it is, but we have to remember that we have had a lot of victories along the way. And, you know, the road building programme was one of them. A lot of people from Reclaim the Streets. So Reclaim the Streets started very much as local campaigns. It then got rather subsumed into the M11 campaign. And after the M11 campaign, Reclaim the Streets came back with a much broader, looking at sort of global capitalism, looking at trying to link up politics and the rave culture, and led to, you know, who used to go to Reclaim the street parties? Come on, hands up proudly. I mean, weren't they something else? You know, taking over empty street or busy streets, motorways. Shepherd's Bush was one of the main ones, and putting on a sound system and thousands of people, and it completely confused the police because people were dancing with them, not chucking things at them. And when Reclaim the Streets eventually got done over by undercover coppers and bad publicity, you know, people then moved on to genetically modified food campaigns. And, you know, that was another victory. We do not have genetically modified food in this country at the moment. And, you know, we were on a run. Fracking, we stopped fracking. In 2008, when the then Labour government were considering a new round of 11 coal-fired power stations, there were many, many different groups trying to stop that, and in particular the Climate Camp, or the Camp for Climate Action. There was a week-long occupation of land by Kings North, incredible over-policing, lots and lots of publicity, along with political pressure from the Greens and other groups who didn't want to see this, and bad publicity. We persuaded Ed Miliband in 2008 to say the only way there would be a new generation of coal-fired power stations was if they had 25% carbon capture and storage, which just stymied the whole thing. Because, as you know, carbon capture and storage is rather like nuclear fusion. It's always 10 years down the line and 10 billion quid in funding. It never happened. So that's one of the main reasons why Britain's CO2 emissions have dropped about 40% on 1990 levels, because we stopped that new generation of coal-fired power stations. And, you know, the Camp for Climate Action was a big part of that. So that was not a little victory, that was a bloody big victory. Since then, I then got involved in drugs campaigning quite a bit, because I was just wondering why so many people were terrified of getting nicked. And a lot of it came down to drug use. And then in the last few years, you know, when XR took off, that's obviously been a huge shift and not quite rebirth, but a huge explosion of environmental concern. You know, along with Zoe and yes. Along with Zoe and Sarah, I was involved in Insulate Britain on the media side of it, and less so with Just Stop Oil, because I got elected and that was all very inconvenient. But you know, one can still do stuff through the conventional political process. In Somerset, we've passed climate emergency motions in Mendip and Somerset. A lot of it is to do with planning and trying to stop bad developments and get good developments going ahead, which we have just had huge success with in Frome in the last couple of days, but not strictly relevant to this. It's, you know, I see my role as being involved in the Green Party in keeping links with all other different groups, because we have to recognise that if you look at the strategies for change, it's sort of personal consumption habits, boycotts, protests, non-violent direct action, and voting. But we have to recognise that none of these on their own are going to be sufficient. It's really got to be taking a scattergun approach, and each of us individually trying to do as many of those things as possible. But we've got to recognise that if it's just NVDA with no political backup, or if it's just politics and political parties with no connection with what's going on the ground, we're going to fail. It's got to be a joint overall strategy. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Shane. So I'm feeling a little bit like the bad witch at the feast now, because yeah, it's got to be one. Because I've just listened and sat through what Shane's talked about, and the successes of the environmental movement and the successes of non-violent direct action, and it has been successful, and the environmental movement has been successful, and yet we find ourselves today in a predicament. So it's a predicament because it has outcomes. It's not a problem that we can solve. So where we all are right now is a predicament, which is going to have outcomes which are going to affect the rest of our lives and our children's lives. right? There is no way out of this anymore, right? That is where we are. And that's why there's 21 people in prison, because we're in a predicament and something needs to change. And so what do we do when we face the predicament? What are the strategies that we can put in place so that the people whose duty it is to defend us and protect us actually start doing it? Because they are not. And we've seen that with the judiciary and with the laws that have just been passed. So judges and the judiciary, like all of us, they've got a duty not to be complicit in genocide. And by continuing to imprison, sentence and punish those people seeking to defend life, people who are protecting us, they are protecting the very people destroying it. I can't remember what Shell's profits were. They've record profits. Why are companies that are destroying the stable climate allowed to make any fucking profits? Like, not even record ones. So we can accept that we will need fossil fuels for a period of time in the future, but you don't need to let the bastards make money out of it. Like, let's stop it. So the judiciary, our politicians, what they are doing right now is they are planning. They have plans that they will act out, knowing that the consequences will be mass death and the loss of a stable climate. Knowing the consequences will be part of the 6th mass extinction. It is to plan a genocide. That's what our state, our government, UK corporations are doing, protected by the judiciary. That's why they're sending people to prison. They've sent people to prison who are sitting here today. They are going to send people to prison who are sitting here today. And we can see exactly how the state's operating. If you end up in court today, charged with a climate crime protest, you are not allowed to mention the words climate change. You will end up in prison if you do so for saying climate change in a UK court, for talking about insulation and poverty because of cold fuel death, poverty because you are too cold. You will end up in prison for saying those words. People are being brought before the courts with no defence, being unable to talk about motivation or context. And the 5 people, well, not the last 5, the previous 5 people who were sent to prison, in sentencing, during the trial, the judge, here, said, facing the end of the world is neither here nor there. So it's not that you end up in court naked, it's that you are stripped before you turn up in the dock. So the system we face is being weaponized against us. And yet, as people sitting here today, we find ourselves in our own predicament. Our democracy is failing us. Politics is failing us. If we don't act, we are going to lose everything we love and cherish. If we do act, we are likely for a period of time to lose everything we love and cherish. So in making strategies going forward, that is the predicament that we are all grappling and facing ourselves with. And Just Stop Oil is determined that it will continue to defy our state and our government. It will continue in civil resistance. And that's why you're seeing the airport actions which have been taking place over the previous weeks, and they've been taking place coordinated across a number of liberal Western democracies, and it's why they will continue, I imagine, to take place in the future. More stuff is going to happen. And yet it has to be, as as has been mentioned, we need more than one approach. So there is also a democratic renewal part of this. We do need a democratic revolution because current politics can't do it. So what's going to take its place? And in people's assemblies or a people's assembly and citizens' assemblies, I believe that there is actually an ability to do something meaningful within that. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in political renewal, Sunday, 12 noon, outside there. If you're interested in Just Stop Oil and supporting us, have a look at the QR code. Write to the Attorney General about the sentences that have been handed down and sign up on the website and come and join us.
I just wanted to say something about strategy here because, and it may just feel like nuance, but to me it's super important points. Like, they're not our politicians, right? They're not our judiciary. It's a system, it's a complex system, it's 5,000 years old at least, and it's been running a genocidal program for 500 years. It's just coming home, right? So there are sort of Pan-African elders who will say to you, whenever you're being asked to uphold a law, you don't talk about, we want to uphold the law here. You ask, whose law is it? Who made that law? On what basis? In whose interest? And so I think it's really important that when we're making demands of the system and when we're thinking of strategies, we never believe or tell people that they are going to change. They're not going to change, because we have a complex system that promotes sociopaths, Machiavellians and narcissists into positions of power, right? It's designed to do that. It's not a broken system. It's just an insane anti-life system. So if we go into it, reimagine together a life-affirming system where we feel the force of nature through us, we're going to have to be with the complexity and the beauty of life. And I really like the mandala that Alnor Lada and Lynn Murphy have put together in Post-Capitalist Philanthropy, which names 4 elements that we need to focus on. Cultural change, so how do we find in amongst ourselves the ways to be in life? And there is much in this festival that's about cultural change, right? So honouring all that work. Let's not be the ones that think we are the ones doing the change, right? All that is part of the work, right? And then indigenous resistance. I'm talking, as I said, about West Africa and the resistance movements there. Where do we really uphold the resistance movements? I mean, really, really. Because part of the system, when it plays through us, it makes us the centre of the story. We're not. We're just a bit of the story, and there's power in the global family that gets marginalised actively in our movements. I've been part of it. I have tokenised people. It happens. We got to move on from that. We have to build post-capitalist infrastructure. It's for sure about democracy, but it's going to be about the legal system. It's going to be about the economy. It's going to be about many things, and much of that's already happening out there as well. Social movements then are an important part of the landscape. And what I think our job is to do in social movements is not to make demands. We can do that as a communication tool, but it's to create the reveal. This is what's been revealing the violence of the movement. And I thought it was a super interesting moment in this last week when Roger Hallam was given a place to speak in the Daily Mail openly. And I think a tide may be turned where the reveal is being embraced, including on the right wing. Now, we might want to celebrate that because that could make change, but climate action without justice at its heart will enable eco-fascism. And fascism is live and well amongst us at the minute. Misogyny, militarism, attacking transgender people, etc. So we have got to get really clear about our climate justice heart as part of the change making that we make. So it's good to appeal to the right in terms of get them to do some useful stuff, but let's not be rooted in that. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. I really agree with that. Can you hear me all right? I just wanted to support and join some dots between my 2 wonderful sisters on either side of me. I absolutely agree the system is working perfectly. The word I use to describe it personally is necrophilic. That's what I said to an FT event in May. I got partial applause from some. Not from all of them, but I think it is absolutely necrophilic, and it loves death. It's like love. It loves death. It's in love with it. It's seeking death. It's because I can't see any other word for it, or political economy, or voracious economic system that's utterly extractive of life. And I guess I wanted to join the dots that I agree with a lot of what Sarah was saying as well about the predicament that we're in. There is so much harm locked in, and I want, personally, from a compassionate, loving, spiritually connected place, I want brutal honesty about the degree of harm that's already locked in, because I think that can take us to a place when we can go through the darkness out the other side and really do the work that we need to do together in community with each other and with people who don't look and sound like us, which is even more important. Also, I feel called to say right now that also I struggle increasingly with the words climate action for a number of reasons. One is that I don't know what success looks like anymore, if I'm totally honest, because there's so much harm locked in. That's my just personal view. But also I struggle because climate is not a silo on its own. And what we're really talking about now, this, as both my sisters have sort of alluded to or directly described, is a deep illness in our elite system, a deep illness in those who seek to get richer and richer and more powerful on the backs of every other form of life, human and otherwise. And I can't sit here and not speak out about what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine right now. We can't. It's totally the same struggle. And as a Jewish woman, as someone with Jewish heritage, I cannot speak without saying what is happening about televised genocide right now. It's the same struggle. It's no different whatsoever. No different. It's power, it's racism, it's patriarchy, it's white supremacism, it's oil, it's all of it. It is no different. So I don't really think anymore there's so much thing as climate action. There's just fucking action, right?
I think it's just worth outlining some of the different strategies for social change that are going around, and in particular, I talked earlier on about simple things like consumer boycotts, consumer pressure to affect change in corporates. Also, I think the 3.5% rule. Are people familiar with the 3.5% rule? The theory that since the Second World War, what was her name? Erica Chenoweth, who's an academic, and I can't remember her
Miriam Stefan.
Miriam Stefan did research into how revolutions were, or big social change was successful since the Second World War. And the conclusion they came up with that roughly was that if you could get 3.5% of the population into the main city square and stay there, there would likely be a police overreaction, which would get big media attention, get sympathy from the other 30-40% of the population who are sympathetic but otherwise involved, and that would then bring them out onto the streets. So, roughly the sort of what happened in some parts of the Arab Spring, people power. So that's the sort of 3.5% rule, if you can get 3.5% of the population. And that's roughly the rule that sort of XR followed. There's also the radical flank theory. Are people familiar with the radical flank theory? Yeah. Very well outlined by a Swedish activist and academic called Andreas Malm, who wrote the book How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is not a how-to manual, but it's looking at a lot of the same movements that Erica Chenoweth and various looked at. But he was identifying behind the scenes, there was actually a lot of sabotage going on. We forget the Arab Spring in Egypt. Tahrir Square was horrible behaviour by the police, but there was hundreds and hundreds of police stations burnt out. And so what Andreas Malm is arguing that underneath a lot of these protests over the years, there's been a sort of slightly hidden sabotagey side, and it's similar with the suffragettes. When peaceful protest didn't work, they took to smashing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of windows along Whitehall. They took to burning cabinet ministers' second homes when they were empty. It was a lot of things, and hunger strikes and the horrible force feedings. It wasn't as pretty as you might believe when you watch the sort of mainstream news, and we honour the suffragettes. Similarly, in South Africa, the ANC was strictly peaceful, but then 1962, Sharpeville, the South African forces just shot loads of peaceful protesters. The ANC realised it would be irresponsible to carry on with that strategy. They looked at guerrilla warfare and that sort of thing and decided they didn't have the experience, they didn't have the weapons. So they formed up Umkhonto we Siwezi, and it was tactical sabotage. It wasn't damaging to people at all. It was going for infrastructure, which had a big effect, because if the energy wasn't working, everybody in the townships knew that something was up. There was still opposition going on. So Andreas Malm argues that the sort of the radical flank effect, if you have a radical flank who is involved in sort of sabotagey things, then the government in the middle is much more likely to swing to a middle view. And I suppose the obvious example would be the civil rights in the United States in the 60s. You had Martin Luther King, highly organized, peaceful demonstrations. But on the other end, you had riots in most American cities, most weekends. You had the Weather Underground and the White Panthers, as well as the Black Panthers, who were being far more upfront. I mean, the Black Panthers were mainly about sort of breakfast clubs and self-help. But when COINTELPRO and the CIA started trying to assassinate, and successfully assassinating many of the Black Panthers, things changed, and the Kennedy government was faced with, do we either go with Martin Luther King, or do we wait for the effects of Malcolm X and Black Panthers and continued rioting? So the threat of that radical flank pushed them into civil rights bills and going along with the sort of middle ground, if you like. So I think those are quite important to understand, those different strategies, the 3.5% rule, relying on peaceful direct action, a probable overreaction from the security forces, and then hopefully that brings out the masses. Now, patently, that didn't happen with XR and JSO. It certainly got raised in the media, but then it got weaponized by the right-wing media, and it came to a situation where the only place we could actually get publicity on was on the right-wing media. The BBC wouldn't touch us, Guardian very little. It was only on these sort of plethora of clickbait right-wing small watched TV programs that then have the 2-minute piece set out. So that got weaponized a bit. So I just wanted to sort of outline that there are different strategies to try to force the government of the day into making changes.
There's also, I think, the point where it's not necessarily a strategy, but it's a moral question, where you actually say to yourself, am I going to be complicit with what the state is now doing? Am I going to be complicit with the system? And it may be that, the chance of being successful is very remote, but I putting your body on the wheels of the machine because the machine is so unpalatable. And I think one of the things that Gaza demonstrates to us really, really well is what the state is prepared to accept, that it will allow to happen to people and to be portrayed to us. So So I think there is also a moral issue to this. It's what is my role as a moral being when faced with a great harm? What am I going to do? Might not work.
And the answer is not keep shopping. Anyway, we've got 10 minutes left. Questions, please, from the audience. A female question, if possible, to start with. And we've got 10 minutes. So,
Kimway, Extinction Rebellion. I think it's just a response and then a question. So just thank you for the real focus on climate justice. And I just really wanted to say that it's so good to hear an awareness of that idea that fundamentally it's about dominance versus harmony as a way of being overall. And we learned that when we try and dominate a living thing, it either withers and dies or it fights back and bites us and kills us. And the planet is in the middle of doing both. So that still doesn't seem to be a lesson to us at that point, this point. And then the question really is around, do we have an example of a sea change or like a successful campaign where there's been a 360-degree media lock-in on what it will report? As in, we're not seeing that effect where we're persecuted as climate activists and there's some channel of media that can effectively put that out, such as the outrage that responds to the persecution of like the 5 years in prison or the 3 years in prison. I don't see it there in the way that I have with other campaigns that I've studied. I guess I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, is this a brand new level of not being able to get through to the press, or is it something that's been seen before, for example, with the suffragettes, and is there a way that you see of breaking through that layer?
There actually has been some interesting stuff in the right-wing press about this. There have been articles in the Times, for example, saying, especially around Silas Reed and sending people to prison for saying climate change, to the effect that, what are we doing? This is not British justice. The fact that that you cannot say the words climate change in a British court is like, that was a step too far for the Times. And I think also the Telegraph has also been similarly warm on that, but I wouldn't say it was a full 360. But the current actions of the judicial system against the environmental protectors, against those in civil resistance, is there is a lot of distaste about it. There is a feeling that we might have gone too far.
I've been with Extinction Rebellion for some time, and I was reminded about Kings North, because that's where I started my activism. I was one of the activists down there at Kings North coal-fired power station. I'm really concerned that you're preaching to the converted here. We all thoroughly agree with what you've been saying. But there are so many people that just will not buy into it. There's so much apathy in the world, in this country particularly. And a lot of it is down to the press. Now, you've mentioned the media, and you've mentioned how they are beginning to change. But I think with Just Stop Oil, one of the things that really worries me is that we're antagonizing the very people we're trying to get to think about what we're doing. And I don't tend to agree with many of the things that Just Stop Oil have been up to, but I would like to be able to focus more on the media to make them broadcast, as you're saying they are beginning to do, what they should be doing, and saying what's really wrong, and criticising the system. And I don't know how that is going to happen, but I don't think Just Stop Oil have got the right approach.
I mean, certainly with Insulate Britain, we used to preface every interview by saying, we're sorry for the disturbances this has caused. We're sorry for your delays, because it's not what we want to be doing. If there were other ways to attract the levers of power, we absolutely would have done it. But as we've seen, just having a demonstration outside a government office or a corporate office, or a letter writing campaign or an A to B demonstration, does sod all. It has no reaction. And so it's really difficult because, as I said Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain were used and abused and weaponised by the right-wing press to attack Labour and, their policy, which I think Just Stop Oil and XR can get a big pat on the back for being part of persuading Labour to adopt no new oil and gas licences in the North Sea. The caveat to that, as you will probably know, there is two types of licence. There is an exploratory licence and a development licence. And Labour are very unclear about which sort of licence they're talking about. The Conservatives have given 190 or whatever it was exploratory licences. We need to make absolutely sure that Labour gives no more exploratory licence, but gives no more production licences. But, it's difficult because you do get the media by creating an opposition. It was slightly different in the road protest days where being up a tree and in winter where there weren't leaves on the trees, it made great protest. It would have been a bit different in the summer where you couldn't see the horrible tree climbers from Sheffield taking out road protesters. But, it is unfortunate. But, yeah, it has caused disruption and it has caused a lot of reaction. And it's hard to know how many of those reactions are bots or trolls or stooges. But it has got us, I think, in a position where all of us feel a bit uncomfortable about it.
I'd like to add one thing, which is in the trials before basically people were unable to talk to motivation and context. In those trials, the people who turned up in front of them had a greater than 50% chance of being found not guilty. So when you are able to explain your motivation and why you acted to a jury of your peers, the chances were that they were going to find you not guilty. And people went, whoa, in context of that, what you did seems quite reasonable. So I think being unpopular is not necessarily a bad thing. Erica Chenoweth's 3.5%, that's what you need to move. So in a way, you do want to preach to the choir. Here you are. But it's not just, we don't just want to preach to you. I actually want to move you into maybe, coming and joining us and being part of the movements, like beyond support and stepping out into something else.
I'm Bridget. Shane knows me. I'm an elected Green councillor for 5 years now. And I was sat up there 5 years ago. And today I'm feeling it's very heavy. And that's not for the first time because this is 5 years in and I get that I'm not as old as some people, but that's the weight is very heavy on my heart and my mind. How can we protect ourselves from full burnout is the first question. And we have now got a new government, which many of us has waited for. Plus, we know that we need electoral change, and it's not a Green government. But where might we find hope? Who can we write to? So where is your one place that you would look for hope, and who can we write to at this government to push for the change we want?
I just want to sort of preface my answer by saying some things are being talked about as if they're sort of factual and static. That's not how complex systems work. And Chenoweth's updated her research and she's saying that civil resistance is not working as well as it did. The anti-life system learns. It learns how to respond to us. So So that, for example, they hire mercenary guards to shoot into the crowds, people that will definitely shoot. So there are certain things that are going down. Same with the media. In that way, I think a huge issue in our movements is not to sit down and actually talk about strategy across the various movements in a way that has time and space and is actually really willing to look at the level of the complexity of this issue. I don't feel I sometimes try and have those conversations with people. I think that's a bit of an issue. The week.OOO, by the way, and look that up if you don't know it. It's a good communications tool. Because I think what these times are calling for is for life to come through us. And I know that's a very hippie thing to say, dressed as Amanita Flyer Garrick today. it means something that life wants to be lived, you know, like life is not asking us to extract from our bodies to try and stop, to build a machine to defeat a machine. I don't believe that's how the change is going to come. I think it's going to come by our juicy human bodies feeling really sexy and like in it together and well together, you know. And sometimes it's hard, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it needs discipline. So there's a very foundational thing that the systems of oppression do, which is to stop us listening to our bodies. And I think that our bodies, menopausal women especially, but will not let you not listen anymore, right? So you know, sister, you know how it is. You've got to listen to your body when it's telling you, no, this isn't right, we need to talk. So I found hope in that. I felt deeply hopeful meeting the resistance struggles in West Africa because, and just to do a short version of the talk from 2 p.m. on Sunday, a just transition will happen when the Global South says you're not having our stuff. We're not paying your debts because of your debts. We're not paying and you're not having our stuff. And that's happening in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. And the bit of our movement that I know best that's been trying to amplify those struggles has been marginalised. Not okay. That's one of the most hopeful things is that we have to get our heads a bit out of our global north arses. And I've had it up there a lot, so just saying, I've modelled it well. And have a look what's happening across the world. It's still going to be a shit show. It's not about that for me. We're all going to die anyway, aren't we? But why don't we live while we're alive, right? I think... I felt like it's being quoted here. Dougal Hines' book, very beautiful book, I think, At Work in the Ruins. I feel like Dougal's a real elder in our movement from the Dark Mountains. And what he's really saying is don't get stuck in the grief and the despair, right? I mean, you go in there, feel it, and then you find your life again, because that's what life wants from us. And when we think we're going to fix it all, there's something that's a bit in the hubris. It doesn't mean we don't strategize. I'm a nerd. I fucking love talking about strategy. I'll talk about it for breakfast, which I did, Rupert. Thank you very much. But let's also be with the mystery as well and with the dance of life and keep finding ourselves. It's all of it, loves. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that's going to have to end now. I know there are a lot more questions here, but we just don't have any more time because we're now on to the next talk.